The year is 2013, fresh off the pinnacle that was 2012 with its launch of Friends, Space, Bad Piggies, Star Wars, and so much more. Rovio would have their work cut out for them to follow up the legendary calendar year. Those 4 games all had something in common. They pushed the boundaries of Angry Birds as a mobile game, introducing new gameplay mechanics radically different from those seen in the original trilogy. Yet, all of them retained the signature art style and ethos that had been with the franchise since day one. For their next major installment, Rovio chose to take the world of Angry Birds somewhere nobody ever expected it to go. No pun intended. Rumors began to circulate around August that the next Angry Birds title would be called Angry Birds Go, but with quite literally zero context. This left the community to question what exactly that meant. Games such as Temple Run were all the buzz at the time, so perhaps Rovio intended to plaster their Angry Birds characters on top of a generic endless runner. And that was the popular opinion at the time, though the Angry Birds YouTube channel would quickly dispel such rumors, essentially confirming Angry Birds was headed for the racetrack. On October 15th, we receive our first gameplay trailer showcasing gameplay reminiscent of Mario Kart, and a launch set for December 11th, 2013. While nowhere near as complex as contemporary racing titles, Angry Birds Go admirably held its own and was easy for anybody to pick up and play, with enough content and immersion to captivate even the most passionate of fans. The gameplay was quite straightforward, only asking the user to steer while the game provided the acceleration. There's a few different race types, each feeling relatively distinct with their own soundtrack to complement the experience. More importantly, there were 4 different racing divisions offering 11 different tracks with distinct layouts and visuals to keep players on their toes, or lack thereof. There are no extremities of any kind on the characters, so heaven knows how they accelerate or steer. Wait, don't give Rovio any ideas. Competing in the events would earn the player coins to upgrade their cobbled together carts to compete in high-class events with even bigger payouts. You'll want to progress through the campaign to unlock more characters to play as, especially given the implementation of the dreaded live system, which thankfully only applied on a character-by-character basis. One of the race types is called Champion Chase, where you'll duel the other characters one-on-one, and after beating them 3 times, they'll join your tree where you'll be able to utilize your unique ability and energy resource. As somebody who's been playing AAA racing games for a good portion of my life, the way by which you progress is objectively lackluster. It never felt as if my skill was making a significant difference in the outcome of the race. Your cupcake capacity is ultimately what determines whether you win or lose in most circumstances, as long as you have basic driving instincts. This starts to get stale as you venture into the air and stunt leagues, where the payouts are scant but upgrades are required to qualify. Would have rather seen a campaign that rewards skills such as cornering and track knowledge rather than simple in-game currency. Then again, this is Angry Birds Go, the game that tries to justify a singular digital cart for $50. Almost as if they wanted you to buy the microtransactions. Despite all of its shortcomings, of which there are many, Go remains one of the most memorable games to the community because at its core, the game is just plain old fun. The driving mechanics allow for grip, drift, and even flight in some cases and work consistently no matter the terrain. The sound effects perfectly fit the over-the-top aesthetic of the game, from loud crashes as you race through the canyons to character showboating as you cross the finish line. Couple that with the outstanding soundtrack in both the garage and track, the audio experience will ensure you keep at it. As for those tracks, each one feels completely distinct thanks to the varied colored palettes from division to division, and layouts with carefully designed corners, banks, jumps, obstacles, and trackside references. It's a game that understands its universe, and plays to it masterfully in creative ways you won't find in many other Rovio titles. The superlatives you can attribute to Angry Birds Go are seemingly endless, though the most striking of which were the 3D graphics. This was the first deviation from the traditional 2D style, though the UI and menus kept their retro appearance, but updated in the new Toon style. Objectively, this game looks rough around the edges, but not prohibitively so, but you can tell this was Rovio's first venture into 3D. The lack of detail and fidelity compared to the Toon's promotional material was stark, but it might have been too big of an ask for a mobile game. I would have preferred cel-shaded visuals to keep the cartoon-like vibe of Toons, which would have been more cohesive with the menace. The other notable first of the franchise were the Telepods, a series of small figures released by licensee Hasbro featuring the playable characters and their corresponding personalized cards. Telepod figures had a scannable code below that had to be paired to a camera. You would put the Telepod on a clear, magnified base and place it on the camera to teleport the character into the game. Then the app magically spawned the teleported cart and character into Mechanic Pig's garage. They were available at most retailers, coming in several different assortments and sets, and were actually shipped to retailers about 2 months ahead of the game's release. This was to allow players to familiarize themselves with the carts in the Countdown app released on October 31st, 2013. In fact, most of Hasbro's merchandise made it to shelves prior to release, including their Jenga sets, but they were pretty much the only licensee who seemed to be creating products for the game. There were a few other companies who created promotional products internationally, but most only associate Go with Hasbro. However, as we now know thanks to the 2021 series of discoveries, this was not supposed to be the case. For our small community of enthusiasts, Toy Fair 2014 is perhaps the most infamous convention due to the sheer number of unreleased development samples by Commonwealth that were put on display. For nearly a decade, photos of the Star Wars 2 plush set have remained in the public domain thanks to the documentation of Sir Steve's guide. But since they were there for Star Wars coverage, the rest of the display remained largely undocumented. Star Wars 2 was one of 2 flagship games for Rovio in 2013, the other obviously being Go, but nothing along those lines had emerged from the event, so we just assumed they hadn't considered it. 7 years went by and the status quo remained. The silence was broken by Twitter user Nikki Freddard, who shared an image that would take the community by storm. It was Commonwealth's 2014 Toy Fair booth with Angry Birds Go merchandise clearly visible, official artwork and all. The source was quickly discovered to be the background of a video showcasing the defunct WikiBear, an interesting product on its own, but come on, we just uncovered a never-before-seen set of plushies from a game that for the most part we all love. Unfortunately, the details were difficult to make out, but this triggered a community-wide search for additional information now that we knew what to look for. The next discovery felt like an even bigger slap in the face, because a high-quality, in-depth look was right underneath our noses, just waiting to be discovered on Commonwealth's Russian YouTube page. Quite literally, this was one of their official pages. I mean, how did we not look there? Discovered by YouTube user General Cryptor, this video takes us behind the scenes of Commonwealth's Hong Kong 2013 showroom, where they'd pitch potential products to investors in hopes of getting enough interest to introduce them to market. At first, the showcase is quite unassuming, featuring all the core and Star Wars products you'd expect, alongside a few oddities here and there. And then all of a sudden, we're shown this. Oh my god, they're real! Look at that beautiful display box. To this day, this is the best vantage point we've ever received with the Go set. Red, Chuck, Bomb, Terrence, Helmet Pig, and Mustache Pig, complete with their promotional material accurate racing gear and display boxes. Unfortunately, the Toons King Pig was absent alongside with what appeared to be specialized cardboard cards from the Toy Fair display. While it would have been incredible to see all the elements Commonwealth planned to feature, this was certainly better than nothing at all. Speaking of indefinite unknowns, we don't have a definitive answer as to why this set was cancelled. Most speculate it had to do with the decline of Angry Birds merchandise as a whole, but that's certainly not a definitive statement. And as I stated last time around, I fear these will remain locked away in Commonwealth storage unit, waiting for somebody to uncover them years later after the fact. And as the prophet I appear to be, that's exactly what happened. Your eyes do not deceive you. Nearly a decade later, I have saved the Angry Birds Go plush line from their captivity in the Commonwealth Archives. It's difficult for me to express the magnitude of what has happened here, but how we got here is neither here nor there. You want to see them, I want to showcase them. At this point, it's as simple as that. As you can see, Commonwealth planned to make this a set of 8 characters, with one of them appearing to be quite early on in development. Whether this means there were more planned characters is unknown, but we've got to work with what we got. Much to my disappointment, the 3D character models in Angry Birds Go were not rendered with their racing outfits, while in the merchandise and promotional material they were. Thankfully, these do feature their distinct attire in addition to revised patterns to capture their tune's aesthetic. We'll start with Red, of course, who comes with his signature shades with printed detailing that capture the shine typically seen as render. Otherwise, he appears to be similar to any other Red plush, but I'm sure you can spot the differences. If you're wondering what lies under his shades, yikes. His eye embroidery appears to be a bit too high, not that you'd ever notice. Moving on to Chuck, who sits inside his triangular racing helmet, which comes complete with the gray visor and black racing stripe. Even the 3 small bolts in the visor are embroidered for that added detail. Minor nitpick, but I believe there should be 4 of them. But otherwise, this one is brilliant. They even bothered to put his white fur patch below his beak, which they easily could have left off. He is looking extremely cross-eyed though, even more so than the regular variation. Bomb is another one of my favorites because they captured all the small details, even down to the yellow chin strap that's only on one side. I'm unsure if a normal Bomb plush lies underneath the helmet, but I can confirm that his wick is a part of the helmet pattern. If you're into the Go Bomb wick debate, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean, on the plush it is a different color, implying it's not supposed to be part of the helmet. Sounds confusing, I know. It is strange to see that only one side of his wick is yellow though. Up next is Terrence, who comes with his blue trucker hat and opaque black shades, so he not only lacks basic extremities, but he also has no way to see what's in front of him. Jokes aside, it is interesting to see the Terrence pattern without his darker feather spots, which for some reason are absent outside of the embroidery around his eyes. It's also noteworthy to point out that he uses his merchandise-specific design and not the green hat variation seen in the official renders. And then there's this thing. I mean, it's clearly supposed to be Bubbles, but he underwent plush surgery. This is the one item that wasn't featured in any of the leaks, and it was clearly for good reason. You can tell it's Bubbles because of his color obviously, but he also has his red eyebrows, 2 head feathers, 2 tail feathers, and black goggles. Sure, his beak isn't shaped correctly, he lacks black underbelly feathers, and his head feathers are way too short, but they call these development samples for a reason. He's also the only character with a longer cut material, making him especially distinct compared to the others. The pigs are surprisingly well represented in this set, having a 5:3 ratio, which you cannot say for most sets. First up, we have the fan favorite Corporal Pig, who is preferably not injured like the original. However, that does not mean he's just a run-of-the-mill minion pig with a regular helmet. While I struggle to see Toon's Corporal Pig here, there's a little more to this plush than what meets the eye. It was difficult to see in the showroom video, but he actually has buck teeth, and I can kinda see why they include that detail. But I would have rather seen them try for the authentic Toon's look or a remake of the classic plush rather than this hybrid. He's missing the strap and spade card if they were trying to go for the Toon's look, and you can still see his eyes. The other 2 pigs are amongst my favorite in the set, and feel like they were given the most attention by the designers. We start with Foreman Pig, who this time has a bushy mustache and eyebrows. I did like the pattern on the original too, it was accurate to the pre-chrome design, but this is so much more visually appealing, and feels higher quality too. Once again, they used his merchandise-specific design, so he comes with his pilot helmet and rubbery goggles, which are also embroidered. And last but not least, we have the Toon's King Pig, who is the only character in the set to not feature racing attire, which granted is game accurate. And besides, just look at his pattern. It's unbelievably fantastic, perhaps the best official Toon-style plush to ever exist. His crown is made of the same material as the classic version, but is clearly much taller and ornate. The sample even has minor details, like the blue jewels on his crown, and even his dark green spots on his skin. There's even a small tail around back, a detail lacking from most Commonwealth Pig plushies. This set certainly has its standouts and duds, but I'd like to think if they had made it to production, the disappointments would look much better. You might not notice this at first, but of the 8 characters they chose for this set, pairs of them belong to one of the 4 racing divisions in the game. For instance, Red and Bomb belong to Speedway, Terrence and King Pig go with Rocky Road, Bubbles and Foreman Pig are from Air, and Chuck and Corporal Pig are stunt characters. Whether this was intentional or not, we'll likely never know. And I'm also unsure whether the matte fur was intended for production or was simply what the factory ended up making. It was around that time they started to produce batches of matte fur specialized sets, so this could have been the case. You can also debate whether the tags are meant to be placeholders, as they're identical to any other 4th generation release. Again, I'd like to think the production variations would have had unique prints for the tags like the contemporary Star Wars and Stella sets. We saw a glimpse of what they might have been going for in the showroom video and perhaps the Toy Fair too. Luckily, these are things you don't entirely imagine because alternate samples of a few of the characters exist, some of which I have to showcase. It's up to you whether you think they look more complete. Circling back to the series of 2021 leaks, an eBay seller who had a connection to Commonwealth sold what appeared to be the initial sample of Go Red. I say what appeared to be because the item lacks any sort of tag to authenticate it, but I believe it's fair to say it's legitimate. I inquired with the seller to ask if they had any additional information, and they produced an image of an early sample of Go Bomb. The image was low resolution, but from what you could see, this one also looked fairly legitimate. Those ones I cannot show you on my nifty turntable because, well, I don't have them. But what I do have are these. You most certainly have a few questions regarding these particular samples, or are potentially wondering what exactly makes them so special. Allow me to explain, because that's kind of my job after all. The most striking one has to be this golden Chuck, but outside of the placeholder color, it's largely the same as the quote-unquote regular one. His beak is rimmed interestingly, giving it some added depth. Terrence has that distinctive feature as well, so perhaps this is one of the ways they plan to stylize these further. Otherwise, just like Chuck, his pattern remains mostly the same, but this variation sports his green and white trucker hat and drops the opaque shades. The pigs are just as compelling, perhaps even more so in my opinion. We have an even more accurate Foreman pig with a woolly helmet, and a slightly better version of Corporal Pig with an attempt at belt embroidery. What stands out to me the most with these pigs isn't their minor improvements, but it's their unique green color that's noticeably different compared to every other pig. All of these are completely one of a kind, with no alternate size variation or true duplicate in existence. Speaking of size variations and duplicates, the full set of samples I showcased earlier have both 5-inch and 8-inch variations. The 8-inch versions also have matte fur interestingly, besides Bubbles of course. Red, Chuck, Bomb, and King Pig have 12-inch variations that do have the higher quality fluffy fur texture, which we could kind of see at the Toy Fair. And the only character to be sampled in 16-inch was Bomb, which you can see here. The variety of size variations is certainly awesome to see, the more the merrier for collectors. But of course, these never did make it to store shelves, so saying all of this has been completely pointless because for the average viewer, you won't be able to acquire these. And on that terrible disappointment, it's time to end. If you have any comments, questions, or complaints, you can let me know in the comment section below. With that I say, peace out. Okay, I simply cannot end the video on a downer like that. So to make it up to you, during the production of this very video, I uncovered something you might be interested in. Do you remember those cardboard carts from the Toy Fair? You know, the ones that you could barely see because each one is made of seemingly 5 pixels? I think you can see where this is going.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
Can your 8-inch platforms and 5-inch display boxes. This is how you package a plush. They may not be on the same level as the Telepod molds, but they capture the look of the carts admirably, considering they're just printing on folded cardboard. From what I can see, they appear to just be reskins of each other, and while some of the elements don't translate to 2D perfectly, these still would have made for an interesting display piece. Or a recycling bin decoration, as the case may be. You know who you are. There are only 4 different prints which are shared between the characters, including Red's Super Roadster, Chuck's Mega Rocket, Bomb's Big Bang, and King Pig's Royal Rumbler. These might have just been a Toy Fair gimmick, but it was a creative idea that I could have seen go into production had Angry Birds merchandise been in higher demand. I'm just relieved to know they're not lost indefinitely. And on that high note, I think it's time to finally end. Peace out.
But I have been watching WikiBear do and say some pretty interesting stuff, so let's get a demo.
Hey, WikiBear, how are you?
Actually, you don't say. Okay, I will add that fact about response to voice talking my ear off is talking to him and there to my database.
How are you today?
Everything is going extremely well.
Oh, good. Don't you want to know how I am?
Yes, please tell me.
I'm doing fine.
How does doing that make you feel?